Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the full moon in Gemini. That's coming up in a couple of days' time. Before I get into that and the chart and so forth, I was thinking about the full moon, of course, and just thinking about, what these energies are speaking to at the moment. There's quite a few things going on, quite a few shifts. We've got Mars has just recently ingressed into Sagittarius. Mercury's just recently ingressed into Capricorn. We've got the solstice, the winter and or summer solstice, depending on whether you are northern or southern hemisphere. That's coming up on the 21st of December, which corresponds to, the sun actually ingressing into Capricorn, of course, which happens on the 22nd of December. Again, the dates that I generally give are based on southern hemisphere, Melbourne local time, more or less. So you just need to convert that to your location. It'll basically be the day before, right, if you're in the northern hemisphere. I actually also was trying to ask the tarot to give us a card for the full moon, and she did, and she gave us the Three of Wands. Beautiful card. I love these cards. Shout out to DJ Nocturna who gifted me these cards, actually. So thank you. They are beautiful. So Three of Wands, opportunities, growth, abundance, aligning with the universe. It's a figure of in this particular card, it's a female. In the traditional deck, it's a man standing there, with the Three of Wands around him, and he's got this sort of wide open view, before him, and he's kind of waiting for what's coming, as it were. We'll talk about this card a little bit more as I continue. We'll just let these ambos go by. So the full moon, at the degree that it's at, which is 27 degrees, so the sun is directly opposite at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, of course, that is a full moon. You get the sun and the moon directly opposite each other at the same degree and same minute. And of course, with full moons, everything is always amplified for better or for worse, right? But this particular degree and this axis is very strongly linked to what's called the galactic center, right, which is a fixed point in the earth, if you like, and it's a very, very potent point of frequency and energy. So there's a lot of transmission coming through relative to Sagittarius and Gemini characteristics, signatures, energies, and so forth. And this morning I was, just kind of looking through social media, and it was a very good example to demonstrate to me just very simply on a very mundane level, and also in a way that's quite a powerful reminder of how we can get very easily, sort of drawn into nonsense and garbage. Not that I got drawn into it, I was very aware, and I make these choices very, very quickly now when I see something where there's, a lot of toxic language and attacking and trolls and things like that going on. I generally just kind of stay away from that, because it's simply a waste of my energy, and it would be a waste of your energy as well. But it did remind me of this full moon energy in Gemini, because Gemini is speech. It's the words that we use to communicate our ideas, our personal opinions. And of course, full moon in Gemini, it's going to amplify the world of communication and speech, ideas, personal opinions, and so forth. And of course, it is opposite Sagittarius, which Sagittarius within itself, is inherently connected to wisdom, expansion, philosophy, religion, astrology, the esoteric world and all of that. But, at the more mundane personality level, it can get quite arrogant and quite sort of self-righteous as well. So we always have these, these shadow sort of components, if you like, of every archetype. There's not one archetype that doesn't have a shadow, and there's not one archetype that doesn't have various levels of its manifestation, of its expression, right? And the expression will come through relative to the person or energy on the earth plane or in the ether that's transmitting the energy, and also how we are receiving it, how we are responding to it or reacting to it, and subsequently how we project that energy back out. So it always does come back to our own level of understanding, understanding, awareness, and so forth, consciousness, right? But this example this morning, somebody posted a picture of himself with two of our local alternate media guys, which are fantastic in what they have done in Melbourne, Australia, because for the last 2 years they have documented all the truth of what is actually been going on out on the streets, you know, with protests, with police, with you name it, with everything. And they have shown exactly what's going on as opposed to fake news and fake media, right? And so I have a lot of respect for them for that reason. And I've actually met them and had a chat to them, and they're really lovely guys as well. But one of them seems to get a bit of a bashing quite often by certain communities and certain individuals. And on this particular post, there was a lot of, derogatory comments, directed towards him, and just trolls, and just bashing somebody, right? And so all I said was, I just wrote a comment and I said, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And kind of left it at that. And then of course I got bashed for actually making that statement, right? And so there it just went. I just saw this energy of Gemini at its worst, if you like, which we haven't even kicked into the full moon in Gemini, but we've got all this Sag energy going on. So everyone's kind of, not everyone, but a lot of people are on that high horse, self-righteous sort of platform, if you like, and bashing others, and making all these judgments, and it just it was a very powerful reminder that I wanted to share with you guys, to remind us all that there's so much of that crap going around, which is so toxic and such a waste of time and such a waste of energy. And we always have the choice of whether we are going to participate in that. And that was just the universe kind of giving me a little experience, a little moment in time where, because I'm constantly evolving and growing just like everybody else is, and I too have my own challenges and so forth. And my Mercury in Aries sometimes just wants to go really quickly in and respond or say something, but I've learned to really navigate that Mercury in Aries in a very diplomatic way, the opposite sign, Libra, actually. And so nowadays, when I see that kind of, negative toxicity being directed, in perhaps a stream that I was involved in with a comment, instead of reacting to the trolls that people, started bashing me because I made that I love that comment, that saying. It's my favorite saying. There are many others, but that's got to be one of my favorite sayings. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And if you really understand that, all it's talking about really is evolution. And so we can get on our high horse and we can have this tendency to want to judge others, for what they've said, what they've done, what they're doing, what they're not doing. But hell, at the end of the day, who's going to judge you? So we must be careful who we judge and how we, bash people and put them down. It's not a good thing to do. It's essentially not a good thing to do. And not really necessary either, because every one of us has a past and every one of us has a future. And I don't know anyone that's perfect, do you? So, I always have that in my mind when I witness or observe a situation, so that I can keep my head in and remain as humble as I possibly can. We all have an opinion, and this full moon in Gemini is going to be, everyone's personal opinion on X, Y, Z, and that's fine. It's fine to have an opinion. It's fine to have an idea. But it's not fine to project that onto anybody or others and just expect people to, believe your idea or your opinion. People will believe what they want to believe. They'll listen to what they want to listen to, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think this full moon in Gemini, it's loaded with powerful words that could be quite people could be quite regretful later on if they're not careful with what they are speaking and what they are communicating. And the thing is, it's actually squaring Neptune. Okay, so here's Neptune again playing a very important role in a lunation cycle. Neptune has been extremely prominent all of 2021 because it was squaring the nodes in Sagittarius and Gemini. And so there has been this whirlwind of confusion on every stream of life relative to what the hell is the truth and what actually isn't, and who's bullshitting and who isn't. And, that's up to each of us to discern. But that has been a backstory streaming through everything that's going on, and it still is. But fortunately, the truth always finds its way to reveal itself, whether we like it or not, whether we try to suppress it or not. The truth will always shine, and that's Sagittarius. Gemini is the facts, the details, the information. Sometimes it's not factual. Sometimes it's just information for the sake of information, So it is a time to really discern again, perhaps even just reflect on the entire year of what we have learnt, really, particularly with Saturn's energy, being in Capricorn and Aquarius, so we had Saturn in Capricorn for the last couple of years. We've got Saturn in Aquarius, this year and for the next couple of years. And so lots of heavy energy, Saturnian lessons and restrictions and, not being able to be as free, relative to the external world at least. But the good thing is that Mars in Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, right? And so 2 years ago, so Mars changes signs every couple of years, right? Comes back to the same sign. So 2 years ago, when it was in Sagittarius, Jupiter was in Capricorn, so that's in its placement of fall relative to dignities and abilities, in terms of rulership and so forth. Each planet has either a place of rulership, exaltation, detriment, fall, or in a neutral position. And this system, which is a very old system of assessing the essence of a planet in a particular sign, I hold in a pretty high regard, because I've just seen how powerful it is. I've seen when Mars is in detriment, or when Venus is in detriment, or when Jupiter is in detriment. I've seen how that plays out, and it's pretty. You can't deny it. You can't pretend it's not there. So planets in detriment and fall, they're going to act in the way the word sounds, in a detrimental way, potentially, right? Or in a fall way, which means often it's a fall from grace. Actually, for if you've got Jupiter in fall, for instance, it can be a fall from grace, actually. So it just depends. But the good thing is that Jupiter is about to go into Pisces, and that happens basically towards the end of December, right? So in a couple of weeks' time. And so what's going to happen is Jupiter and Mars will form a square. Now, by traditional orbs, the orb between them is considered perhaps to be too wide. It's about 11 degrees. Personally, I don't think that's too wide. I would absolutely count that as a square. And, given it's Jupiter loves everything big. So it's a big orb is like, it's so Jupiter, right? So anyway, it's just very inspiring and encouraging to have, first of all, Mars in Sagittarius, which is incredibly uplifting, inspiring. It's abundant kind of energy. And particularly when you bring Jupiter and Mars in aspect together, it literally is abundant energy. The only thing that sometimes can be an issue with the Mars-Jupiter aspect, it can be just shooting way too far, shooting way over the top of what you're actually able to really do with that energy. Like, basic mundane example, there's a marathon that is happening in a couple of weeks' time in your local community, and you've got this Mars Jupiter transit going on in your chart, and you feel, wow, I'd love to do that. I feel like I can do that. I've got the energy to do that. And this marathon is like 50 kilometers or something like that, and you can't do it because you haven't prepared for it, you're not fit enough for it. It's just a simple example. So sometimes it can be misguided type of enthusiasm, right, of that Mars Jupiter, but essentially it's abundant energy which gives a sense of passion and excitement and enthusiasm and confidence and the ability to really go for things, right? So it's a really beautiful transit, this Jupiter going into Pisces, which is its own home sign, a feminine sign. Mars in Sagittarius, which is a fire sign. It's fueled with inspiration. It's fueled with wanting to connect to something more hopeful, a lot more positive, having a more enthusiastic sort of outlook towards life. And we really need these energies, because we've been hit hard. We've been smashed by Saturn, the last couple of years. And of course, that has its positive aspects as well. Saturn is the teacher. He's the mentor. He's the one that's going to teach you, discipline and patience and perseverance and, working, really just working hard at things. It may not be very pleasurable because pleasure is all about Venus. Saturn's got nothing to do with pleasure, but it's got everything to do with getting the job done, right? So everything has its multiple sort of expression. It just depends on how we are feeling that energy, how we are responding to that energy, and what that energy is actually doing in our chart, as it were. What is it sort of activating in our own chart? And then what is actually happening in the context of our life, the story of our life? That's going to further describe how we respond or react to these different energies. So lots going on. Let me just bring up the chart. Where are we? Share screen. Yeah, okay. Let me just, sometimes I do this by accident, and then when I want to do it purposely, I can't. There we go. Alrighty, so here it is. Okay, so this chart is based for Melbourne, Australia, 19th of December. It's 3:34 p.m. So Australian Eastern Daylight Time, because we're on daylight savings, given that it's summer here at the moment. So let me just grab a little helper and highlight some things for us. Okay, so there's the full moon in Gemini, of course, opposite the sun. 27 degrees and 28 minutes. That runs along the galactic center. I think, from a collective perspective, that's an outpour of, I suppose, just to use common words, if you like, it's an outpour of a frequency and energy that can help raise our own consciousness and understanding. Raising our consciousness is something that I feel anyway, is something that we should always be working on. We should always be trying to raise our consciousness, trying to have, greater insight, greater understanding. Of course, nothing works overnight and nothing happens overnight, as it were. But I think, when you have a conscious intention and purpose towards, really wanting to expand your mind, your consciousness, break out of the consensus reality, Saturn. That's not to bash Saturn, and it's not to disregard Saturn. When you actually deny Saturn, all you do is experience it outside of yourself, so in the world around you, and it just comes at you in a pretty heavy sort of way. Saturn is a very heavy energy, and unless integrated, we just simply experience it out there in this 3D reality, because this 3D reality is ultimately governed by the planet Saturn, Kronos, which is the lord of time, the lord of karma. It rules structure, earth, reality, systems, governments, all that sort of stuff, right? So the more we can integrate any energy, the more we can integrate it, the more whole we become, the more consciousness we raise, the more at peace we are, the more authentic we are, the more free we feel, and the less likely we are to waste our energy and waste our time in getting involved in either conversations or situations that essentially are futile essentially. So here's the square to Neptune, okay, that I was saying this full moon has an aspect to. It also has a trine from Jupiter, okay, and so of course it forms a sextile to the sun. The closer aspect is Jupiter, without question, because Jupiter is 28 degrees and the full moon is 27, so that's only 1 degree apart, right? The Neptune is much further, but it is still very much there, and it's still going to be very, very active. And so with Neptune, which is the trickiest energy to integrate, the trickiest energy to work with, because things can happen in a way where you have no idea that it's happening, you don't understand what's happening, and you come out of that later thinking, wow, like where was I? What was happening? What was I actually thinking, or what was I seeing in that situation? You know, just this blurred sense of perspective, or disappointment. That's a word that absolutely corresponds to Neptune when Neptune is operating at the mundane personality level and is being projected onto a narrative, a person, a situation, a condition, because Neptune represents the ideal. And nothing can live up to that kind of ideal, which is God's source creation to all things, right? So we always have that issue when it comes to Neptune, when we are projecting it, you know, externally onto human beings or situations and so forth. So we always have to remember with Neptune, what am I seeing here? What do I want to see? What am I trying to see? Am I seeing what I want to see, or am I actually seeing what's really there? It's a really tricky energy. And here it is forming a square to the sun and the moon. So it's actually a T-square. T-squares are a very, very powerful planetary aspect pattern. Very, very powerful. And so basically what this says in short is that the sun and the moon that are opposite each other in the archetypes of Gemini and Sag, which is basically connected to speech on both levels, because Sagittarius is about communication as well, but it communicates in the wider scope of things. It has a broader vision. You know, with Sagittarius and Jupiter, the sky is not the limit. The sky's the limit would be Saturn. Saturn rules clouds, it rules limits and boundaries and limitations and so forth. Jupiter has no boundaries, neither does Sag for that matter. So, and Neptune in Pisces certainly has no boundaries. Okay. And, you know, Gemini is a mutable sign as well. So we have three mutable signs: Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, mutable energy. Mutable energy is absolutely awesome for the ability to be fluid and flexible in movement, thought, perspective, desires, dreams, etc. But it can also rattle our energy a little bit, because you can get sort of directed in all these different sort of ways or pathways, and your energy gets dispersed and scattered all over the place, and it doesn't remain focused in one particular way. That's the inherent problem with mutable signs when they are operating in a way where there's very little, let's say, purpose and conscious sort of practice with that energy, right? Because the desire of mutability is to just free flow and just be anywhere and everywhere, and just, you know, entertain that path, entertain this path, doesn't really matter, right? It's that freedom kind of movement. So the full moon in Gemini will get filtered through that Neptune. And so seriously, on a mundane, practical, earthly matter or level, relative to, again, the 3D story and paradigm that's being played out, this is a very, very, very strong signature for absolute bullshit to be dispersed. I'm just being very frank, right? So at that external, mundane, everyday kind of level, it's likely to be information that has a Neptune sort of process and filter going through it. Now, when I see Neptune, Gemini, Neptune, Mercury, and as I've said before in a fairly recent video, I've done a little bit of research, and just about every prime minister, what do you call them in the States? I've just forgotten what you call them in America. So whoever leads your country, right? I've just forgotten the name. But in this part of the woods, we call them prime minister, right? So just about every prime minister I've looked at, going back to, sort of early 1900s, if you like, they all have a Mercury Neptune aspect. It's a classic signature for basically bullshitting. Like, it literally is. It doesn't have to be that. It can be inspired poetry, inspired communication, music. It can be lots of other wonderful things, but it typically is someone who bullshits quite a lot. Okay. So even though Mercury is not necessarily in this picture per se, because it's not actually in direct aspect with Neptune, but we do have Gemini as the full moon. So Gemini, again, like I said, it's knowledge, information, speech, communication, and through Neptune, there's going to be a lot of bullshit that gets dispersed. So that's not a big deal, because it's not something new, and it's not like we're not used to that, particularly with what's happened to the world in the last 2 years. We've essentially been bombarded by false information on a number of different levels. So we're all pretty, we've all pretty clued into that. We're all pretty aware of what's going on, right? So that doesn't have to be a problem necessarily. But I guess, on the day of the full moon, or leading up to the full moon energy, or just post the full moon date, those few days are just very, the energy is very volatile, if you like, for, energy around communication and information. And so, your own communication, or conversations you're having with people, or information you're kind of receiving or putting out there, it's just very wise to kind of really discern, right, what actually is truth here. Sometimes, you can get a bit of information from somewhere or something, and you could be in a really vulnerable state, for instance, a vulnerable position. And so that vulnerability leads you to grasping onto straws, grasping onto anything that's said, and taking it on as if it's gospel and holy, HOLY, right? So, it's just good to be very aware of what can potentially manifest, right, through a full moon, for instance. And so with Neptune there, I would say be very cautious about what you are believing and listening to, and also what you are spitting out, what you are giving out. Is it truth? I saw a really good point about making a comment. So, for instance, you want to say something to somebody, right? And so I can't remember all the questions now, but the questions, 2 of them I remember. Is it truthful? Is the comment you're about to make truthful? Is it going to be beneficial for the person? Is it, coming from a good place? These are some of the questions that we could ask when we are considering, spitting out something. That's a good way to kind of monitor and filter our own thought processes and our ideas and opinions. Does it even really matter? Here's a good example of does it really matter? And I've been so aware of this ever since I heard Eckhart Tolle say this. Eckhart Tolle is a modern day teacher of ancient wisdom, right? Pertaining to the world of duality, dualism, non-dualism, wisdom teachings that are also, he draws from the Bible as well. He's an amazing guy. He's an Aquarian, actually. And most people would look at him and listen to him and think, God, this guy is so freaking boring. It's like he's just no animation. He doesn't have any personality. That's so Aquarian. It's that really high advanced level of Aquarius, where there's literally no ego. What's the opposite sign to Aquarius? Leo, right? There's the ego. Anyway, there's an example, and this is a really powerful example to think about, even relative to this full moon, because this full moon is going to kind of evoke in us, if you like, words, certain words. So he was walking into his apartment, and as he was walking into his apartment, his neighbor stopped him, and she just started chatting, right? And so for about 10 minutes, and he just said nothing. For about 10 minutes, she was just going on about her tap not working, that this happened yesterday, that this happened this morning, that she got her electricity bill and it was too high, or basically she rattled off about 20 different things that were all going wrong, right, in her day, as it were. And as she was going on and on and on and on, and so a very negative stream, right? Because there was just no room for solution or hope or trust. There was no room for that, right? And so as he stood there receiving this information, he just looked at her, and she finally just got it herself. She just stopped and she looked at him and she said, wow, this actually really doesn't even matter, does it? This stuff that I'm going on about, you know, in the essence of life and breath and love. She didn't actually say that, I'm saying that, but that's kind of what she was thinking. She just said, look, this really doesn't mean anything, does it? And I can't remember exactly how he responded, but I love that example that he often uses through his teachings and his talks, because it's just a really great reminder of how, you know, with some awareness and some reflection and some pausing, we can really conserve our energy, raise our frequency, and be completely aware and conscious of what we choose to participate in through conversation or otherwise. And I think this energy is just, you know, a reflection of those sorts of things. What are we saying? Why are we saying it? Who are we saying it to? What's the purpose? What's the point? Is there any meaning to it? Is there any truth to it? This is the energy, right, of this full moon. At a, you know, more higher transcendent sort of level, if you like, you know, this can be beautiful, inspired, you know, poetry, inspired visions, inspired ideals, you know, dreams, things that you like creating a, you know, a vision board or a dream diary, you know, things like that. There can be so much inspired information that can come through because of that Neptune forming the square. The fact that it's square, though, it really does point to the issue of either listening or believing in something that's not actually true. And so this is where, again, we need to be very careful. But, you know, we have all this Sag energy going on because we've still got the South Node in Sag. In this chart, the vertex is in Sag. Mars is in Sag, and Goddess Vesta is in Sag, and the Sun is in Sag. And so this is all upbeat energy. It's optimistic, upbeat, enthusiastic, confidence, faith, inspiration, ready to just kind of explore, be adventurous. You know, I mean, even if there are restrictions and limitations, we can still be adventurous in our mind, you know, with our ideas. There may be certain things that don't allow us to act on certain things at the moment, but that's not permanent, is it? Because nothing is permanent, you know. Everything changes. I mean, even here with this nonsense of a narrative that's playing out, the people who have not taken the jab have been locked out of society, as it were, for quite some time. And I'm one of those people. And I have only had access to supermarket, petrol station, or pharmacy. That's it, nothing else. And that's fine. I've dealt with it, right? And so anyway, yesterday they announced that and I think I know why this has happened. They announced that the people who are not jabbed now have access to retail. So we can now go back to shopping malls and clothes stores and shoe stores and whatever, right? And who cares really? But it's just funny how now we are allowed to do that, right? So it's just an example of how things do change. Nothing stays the same and nothing is permanent, right? So It's kind of like, you know, in Melbourne, we have a funny saying. People say, oh, the weather in Melbourne is really, it's really shit because, you know, you have 5 seasons in one day kind of thing. And it's true. We often do. You know, we can go through summer and it can be freezing cold one day and boiling hot the next day. And so when people complain about the weather, I say to them, well, just wait 5 minutes and it'll change, you know, and that's actually true. And that's also true with our emotional state, right? And how we're feeling about things. We might wake up and, you know, be feeling really low. Our mood might be really low. Our energy might be really low. We're feeling sort of discouraged and so on and so forth. And again, I would say to that, well, just wait, because that too will change. Everything is in constant motion and movement. Everything. Nothing is static. Even this chart that you see on the screen, this is not, it's not static. We've just frozen it in time for the purposes of reading the energy of that exact moment in time. But if I was to fast forward this even 1 second later, you'll see that there's a shift, right? A second is, yeah, you won't see much shifting, but the point is everything continues to move, right? Energy, motion, movement. Jupiter trine the moon, I really like that because I think that can be true inspiration with our own ideas, things we are learning at this time or have been learning throughout this entire year. I think a lot of us have learned a lot. A lot of us have learned things that we never thought we even needed to learn or hadn't really considered as important before. You know, we've all learned a lot this year. So this Jupiter trine the moon is a really, I love Jupiter moon aspects. It's such a beautiful energy because it's emotional optimism. You know, it's being uplifted emotionally, right? So can't complain about that. And, you know, of course, Jupiter is in Aquarius. So, you know, that's still very much speaking to, you know, the human race, the human family. And, you know, it's a bit tough because Jupiter in Aquarius is not a bad place. It's actually quite a good place, just to use simple language. But what Jupiter is carrying and has been carrying is that Saturn, being the ruler to Aquarius, is in Aquarius. So, you know, Saturn's kind of got this upper hand, right? The energy of Saturn has been speaking through the energy of Jupiter in Aquarius as well. And we haven't really been able to get away from that Saturn energy since Saturn ingressed into Capricorn, you know, a couple of years ago. And, you know, more or less this year has been in Aquarius. But the interesting thing is that, as you'll see here, I'll just animate the chart. So I'll just show you when Jupiter goes into Pisces. So there it is there, right? So it's the 29th of December at around about 3:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And so there's Mars at 11 degrees of Sag. Now, like I said, most traditional astrologers would say, oh, that's 11 degrees, that's too wide. I don't think it is too wide. Jupiter loves things that are big, just to kind of keep a bit of humor in there. But I mean, it depends which level of astrology you're working with. You know, in ancient astrology, planets in signs can be, you know, square, or opposite or conjunct, even if the orb is 30 degrees or 29 degrees apart, right? Which is almost going into the next sign, right? Or virtually is. So depends how you're looking at it. But you could have, for example, we could have Jupiter at 0 and Mars could be at 29 degrees of Sag. That's almost a degree, a sign rather, because Mars would be ready to go into the next sign, which would be Capricorn. But in old ancient traditional astrology, they are still square each other by sign, and that is considered to be just as powerful if they were squaring each other by sign and degree. So these are the sorts of things that you need to kind of learn, understand, and explore, you know, in your own chart and many, many other charts to see how this might work, right? So I think this aspect actually is very important. And what else was I going to say? There's also a reception going on as well, okay? Because Jupiter in Pisces, first of all, it's in its own home sign, rulership. So it's a very, very powerful Jupiter. Unfortunately, it's not going to be in Pisces very, very long. It's going to kind of fly and then fly into Aries, and that's just how it is. But we have to make the most of Jupiter in Pisces while it's there, right? And so Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So what that means is that there is a reception going on here because Mars is in Jupiter's sign. And so there's a couple of things going on. They're actually square each other by sign, and I would say by aspect, and they're also in a reception because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So Mars is hosting Jupiter's sign. So there's a reception. When there is reception, it just means that the energy is being transferred, it's being supported, assisted, it's got a more amplified sort of level of oomph to it, right, if you like. So that's a really great thing. So let me just go back to Mars will be in Sagittarius, by the way, until around about the 25th of January. I might come back and talk about that journey of Mars because I would like to say a few more things, but it is essentially inspired energy. It is, it's come out of Scorpio, the dark cave, the underworld, where it's been kind of sorting through and working through some much deeper content and issues that we have a very strong feeling relationship to, and intense confrontations even within our own self, and also matters around willpower, matters around where we need to sort of further, what sort of fears might we be holding on to, and how can we sort of transform that kind of fear or energy. The desire and will to really penetrate very, very deeply in anything that we have sort of reflected over while Mars has been in Scorpio. So it's the underworld, it's the hidden, the private, it's the components of our psyche and our self that we don't share with the public necessarily, and we just don't even share with even people in our close life. We have some very private, secretive, if you like, components to our life, and we've got the right to be like that if we so wish, right? But in Sagittarius now, it's like we've been in this dark cave, and now the spirit of Sag has opened us up to shoot our arrow into the bright blue Jupiter sky. So there's this sense of having gone through the deep, murky, dark kind of waters of experiencing or seeing things that were perhaps difficult to be confronted with. And however we worked through that, however we dealt with that, however we responded to that is a completely different situation for each of us, and whatever it brought up. And naturally, a lot of that is going to be reflected through where Scorpio is in your chart as well. So where has Mars been moving the last few weeks in relation to your birth chart? But now in Sagittarius, we are being injected with spirit, fire. All fire signs correspond to spirit, energy, excitement, enthusiasm, just ready to kind of go back out there, if you like, and explore and have fun with some adventures and take some risks and, kind of go into new territory and things like that. It's an overall sense of confidence and enthusiasm, right? Mars in Sagittarius. I love Mars in Sagittarius. I think it's a great place for it, actually. So, we have this Sag energy building up because the sun very soon is going to go in Sag. Look, I'll come back and touch on that. Sorry, the sun left Sagittarius and ingress into Capricorn by this stage. I meant to say I'll come back and touch on the sun's ingress into Capricorn. Hopefully, I'll see, because we are getting really close to the end of the year, and I've got a few readings that I need to do for clients, and I'm trying to kind of get a couple of them in before Christmas for them as well. And then I too kind of need some time out for myself as well, and just spend time with the people in my life, over these sort of holiday seasonal time, if you like, or even just rest actually, and just have some me time, if you like. I've had a little bit of me time in the last couple of weeks, just a day here and a day there, but it'd be nice just to have like a week off and just do no astrology for a week, right, and just completely rest. I haven't done that, I don't know, maybe for over a year, to be honest with you, probably last Christmas actually. So anyway, the other thing that I want to mention as well about the Gemini full moon chart, there's two other interesting things going on here that are important to note. First of all, Venus is stationary and obviously preparing for her retrograde cycle. And so I've spoken about this fairly extensively in my last two videos, one with Ariel and one that I did myself, where I talked about Venus from the point of view of the myth of Inanna. So if you're interested in understanding Venus and the myth of Inanna, which is the journey into the underworld, and there she is with Pluto, going into the underworld. She's stationary. You can see the S there. So she's pretty much stopped. Okay. And she was slowing down, and now she's stopped because she's getting ready to change direction into her retrograde cycle, and that will be active for quite some time. I have spoken about that, so I won't go into that too much, but it is very interesting to me that the stationary point happens on the day of the full moon. So again, with a Gemini full moon, there can be a lot of mental activity and a lot of networking and chatting and busyness and doing this and doing that, etc., etc. And that's all fine. That can be a beautiful experience as well. But I think with the Venus going stationary retrograde, there's a reminder here of Venus telling us, it's time to slow down a little bit. Don't get too, sort of into the headspace, Gemini, and, sort of flood the psyche, the left brain, the the lobes of the brain. Don't get too caught up in the nitty-gritty details, information of every story that's being told. Venus is asking us to slow down, take a step back, chill out, and get ready to reevaluate many things in our life, right? And so this is happening as the full moon occurs. The other thing that's happening is Chiron, which has been in Aries for quite some time. It spends a long time in Aries, is stationary on this day as well. And the difference here is that Chiron has been retrograde, so it's going to go stationary direct, right? And it happens during the full moon. So we've got two planets at stationary points. One's going backwards, one's going forwards. They both represent and mirror very different things. I've spoken about Venus. I will come back and speak about Chiron moving direct, because that's going to need more time. I'll need about 45 minutes at least to talk about that and why and how that will be significant for us, particularly on an evolutionary level. But it is I like that Chiron is actually moving direct. It's going to be very, very helpful with our own personal healing journey around Aries type matters, so I like that. I'll come back and speak about that, but I just wanted to highlight that it is actually stationary direct on this day, and Venus is stationary retrograde. So just in summary, Neptune squaring the full moon. Be careful of bullshit. Be careful of, just information that's just absolute garbage, absolute nonsense, just, and being, by the way, being projected and portrayed by authorities and, you know, people who own channels, you know, I don't want to name names, but you all know what I mean. Commercial TV, commercial news, you know, it's pretty evident and obvious how much they have lied. They've been caught out so many times. So many times. I love it. You know, we need these people that deliberately and maliciously lie against the welfare and well-being of humanity, need to be held accountable. They just need to be held accountable. So, like I said at the beginning, truth always shines and it will prevail. So, be careful with Neptune. Let it be more of a inspired energy. You know, you may just want to spend a couple of days in a retreat, meditating, in a bath, having a bottle of wine, you know, whatever it is you fancy, you know, just take some time out, slow down. Venus has slowed down. She stopped, actually. She's reminding us, chill, just chill. Coco reminds me to chill every day. Thank God I've got her. She's a gift. Venus rules gifts. Jupiter trine the moon, as I said, you know, beautiful, inspired, emotional contentment, being content, you know, feeling supported. Jupiter is the planet that helps us feel supported in life. It always is that energy. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. There are other, you know, aspects that I could have spoken about really, but I want to kind of leave it there because I have spoken enough, I think, just to kind of give us a, you know, an overview of the energy of the full moon. I just wanted to say as well, with Mercury in Capricorn, I was thinking about this when Mercury went into Capricorn, which was on the 14th of December, and it will be there until the 3rd of January. And then, you know, in a few days' time, we're going to have the sun in Capricorn. My favorite person who represents the highest level of Capricorn would have to be Martin Luther King. That soul was, I think, such a profound figure in the world, you know, at that time especially, and his integrity and morals and ethics and authenticity really showed through his actions and how he spoke. And so if you want to feel the more evolved level of Saturn Capricorn energy, draw from those sorts of souls. A person doesn't need to be alive for us to have a connection to them or to feel inspired by them. As a matter of fact, the astrological birth chart, even when we leave this body, it's still actually active, believe it or not. There's many examples I could give you, but I'll give you just one example of a particular musician, and I've just forgotten his name. But he was a very famous musician back in the 60s or 70s, and I can't remember what year he died either. But anyway, he died a long time ago, and what happened was in the last couple of weeks, a record that he'd produced or something like that was found. Somehow it was revived, you know, brought back to life, you know, it was resurrected, right, which is Pluto. And that Pluto sort of example in relative to his chart, transiting Pluto at the moment while this music has been revived, resurrected from an artist who died many, many years ago, is hitting off in his chart. I think it's actually, it's either Venus or the North Node. I can't quite remember now, but it's one of those two, but either one will do it anyway. Pluto is the energy that corresponds to things that leave, but things that reappear as well. So anyway, the moral of the story is that we can tune into spirit energy from souls that have passed through, that are no longer in the physical. Anything like that can truly inspire us as well. So it's always it's good to remember that, I think, because the physical dense Saturn reality very easily tricks us into limitation, right? Into just being constantly preoccupied with the 3D world, right? And kind of forgetting about spirit, and just energy and frequency, which is everything all the time, in motion, moving. It is good to be totally present and in the moment. And in fact, that's the only place we can truly be in, really, from certainly from a physical perspective. But we do have these zones we can go into through visualization, meditation, memory, that can create deep, deep, deep healing and inspiration. Think about when you pull out a photograph of yourself and somebody that was important to you, and let's just say A, they are no longer on the planet, or B, they are just no longer in your life, but you have a really fond memory of that time you spent with that person. Well, when you pull out the photo and you look at it and you connect to that person, you're connecting to them right now, even if they were around 50 years ago or whenever, 5 years ago. Time on that level is it really is an illusion. So allow yourself to be inspired by what cannot be seen and cannot be felt in the physical material world. And this is Sag energy. Sagittarius is about inspiration, right? On those bigger levels. So happy full moon in Gemini. Make sure your words are kind, considered, truthful, and what purpose do they have for you to even say them? Yeah. See you soon, guys. Hopefully I will see you before the year is through. Much love, much blessings. Thank you so much for your love and support for this entire year. All of you that have been with me, newcomers, people that have been with me for a couple of years. I love you all. I thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye.